So Unit 4 is our next unit. In it is question of the day 1. Question of the day 1, you're going to write 100 words or more answering a question about the advantages and disadvantages of digital art over traditional art. And then we're going to get into assignment 1, which is a fantasy landscape that you composite from at least 5 external photo references. So the first part is this question of the day. Well, that's up on the screen. I'm going to pass this example around. This is from the first semester teaching this project here. And that's an example of how this first assignment might be printed and used as a portfolio piece. But this question of the day is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of digital raster, pixel-based images over traditional art? And this can be about paintings, it can be about sculptures, it can be about typography. Like, I'm old enough that I learned typography in school by painting it with graphic paints on artboard and then having this photographed, whereas now it's all digital. But here we have an example of fantasy landscapes, right? Imagined landscapes. This is one done digitally, and there are a lot of flaws with this one, right? And this is one done with ink on rice paper, done traditionally. They're both imagined. They both have some interesting uses of clouds and structures and trees, but they're very different. And this question of the day 1 is supported by and will help you think about what we talked about at the very beginning of the class on all these aspects of digital art, right? The things that are great about it, the things that are problematic about it, and especially this section, which is what we're working on now about compositing and how useful it is, but how it can also be a pain, right? To learn how to control. And maybe it's not as easily adapted to as traditionally trying to do something. It doesn't feel as natural to us to work through a machine sometimes. So you write 100 words or more for that, and we'll discuss it in class. Now we move on to assignment 1. So assignment 1, you have to come up with a theme. And you can use any theme you want, but sometimes the blank page problem can really weigh on us heavily. So I'm just going to use a theme of a fantasy landscape that's related to the children's book themes I've been using. So I've been using Greek myths, right? And Greek mythology has a lot of cool settings that are fantasies. You have Hades, you have Olympus, right? And what is Olympus? Olympus is like a city up in the clouds amongst high mountains. So I'm thinking of something like that. This example is from a desert with these weird shaped rocks. This is all super tall glaciers that are stacked up on top of each other. This one that I just passed around the print of is a post-apocalyptic Seattle after a bombing. This one is like a southwestern desert with these really huge megalithic marble sculptures. This one is kind of this weird crystalline alien landscape with a volcano with a big rock stuck in it. The thing is, none of these should be recognizable to the people that made the components that went in to make that. So this is an original landscape. It can be inspired by things. It can be inspired by the Hercules Disney movie and Mount Olympus, but I have to make my own original version of that because concept art is all about your ideas. So you can see past playlists on this. You can see more student examples. So as we get into it, we know what compositing is. We've done it before. It's digital collage. But here we're going to try to blend at least 5 reference images into a believable landscape. It can be as fantastic as you like, but all the components need to fit together. Does that make sense? So you can't have a cotton ball cloud that comes from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Christmas special next to a photograph of like pink sunset clouds because they won't match the same reality. But if you want to make it all look like it's made out of cotton balls, you can do that, right? So we can find this reference anywhere we like online. We can use Google Images. We can use Pixabay. We can use public domain images like ones that our taxpayers have paid for. This is concept art from NASA. This is not a Mars rover photograph. This is concept digital art made from composites, just like what we're doing for our project, using the science as best they can tell to tell the view from this Goldilocks moon that they found, right? That would have an atmosphere and knows it has surface water and clouds in its atmosphere. But they need to be large enough, because if we're going to make something that's at least 8 by 10 inches by 300 pixels per inch, we need our individual references to be at least 1,000 pixels in dimension, even larger if they're going to be a major aspect. We can work larger than 8 by 10. I ask you not to work larger than 13 by 19 inches, just for the processing speed within PhotoP. Now, inspiration. We're going to do a little exercise to understand what we're going to try to get with our landscapes. So it's one thing to know your setting. Okay, I want a city up in the clouds like Olympus. But I don't want to just make a city. That's not a really useful setting. A really useful setting needs 3 layers of depth. It needs foreground, middle ground, and background. To help explain that, I have this really quick link. I just put this in this morning. This is from a movie called Klaus on Netflix. It's a really nice animated film. It's actually all 2D animation, but they use that flat 2.0 kind of layer style technique to make it look 3D, so it goes from this to this. But this that I'm sharing you is not about that. It's about how they create the backgrounds. And this is true for almost all concept art and
To make
CGI.
the backgrounds pop and appear 3D like the characters, the animators use several different techniques, such as multiplanes, where you have layers on top of layers to give the illusion of depth.
Simple enough. So
To make the
what I've
backgrounds
done
pop and appear
is I've isolated what they mean. So you start with the furthest background. And then you have the next closest thing. And then you have the next closest thing. And this is middle ground. Middle ground is important in your setting. Because notice, we talked about scalability, we talked about contrast, we talked about the importance of silhouette with your emojis. This middle ground is the aspect in this just blue concept art that is sharpest and clearest, right? Everything that was background is really hazy and light compared to how sharp and contrasted the middle ground is. Then we layer on top of that the foreground. And the foreground gets darker and darker. None of it is nearly as sharp or as contrasted as that middle ground. Even when we put an extreme foreground, that's really kind of overlapping the viewer's vision, you still see the middle ground nice and sharp. So I'm going to turn on my FaceTime app here. So it's in the video, but I want you to do this exercise with me really quick. You're going to put your hand in front of your face like this, right? If you focus at just your hand, notice how everything around your hand is blurry. That's 2 layers of depth. Your hand is in focus, it's the foreground. Everything that's blurry behind it, that's the background. Make sense? Now, we're going to put a second hand in between the hand you already had up. And if you focus on the hand that's nearest to your eyes, you might go a little cross-eyed, but you'll see you also have just 2 layers of depth. This hand is sharp, everything else is blurry. But if you open up your fingers and you focus on the hand that's further away, that hand is sharp and in focus. Everything behind that hand is blurry, and everything in front of that hand is blurry. That is foreground, middle ground, background. That is 3 distinct layers of depth in one image. That is what we're going for, no matter what your landscape is. So, foreground, middle ground, background. And I'll just strip it here. And it's always good to start with background. So when you're thinking of your theme, what kind of sky do you want, right? Do you want a cosmos filled with galaxies? Or do you want heavy clouds? Right? Are they storm clouds? Are they colorful clouds? Do you want rainbows? But that would be the furthest thing away. And then the middle ground is what really matters. That's what you need the best reference for. That's the most contrasted. So good inspiration for this is animation. Because animation landscapes, the things behind the cartoon characters, like the Roadrunner, they have to give you all these options for the character to activate, right? A foreground, middle ground, background. And some of them are more focused on foreground. Some of them are more focused on distant background. The most effective ones are middle ground focused. So they have something in the extreme foreground, but most of the contrast is in the middle ground, and then they go off into the background. So here's a past student example. They had a theme of mountains and waterfalls, rivers and streams with a bridge. At first in their sketch, they had a city way in the foreground, just to make everything look bigger. But as they found reference, they decided, no, I don't want that. I just want a really strong bridge so that the eye can be led back dramatically into the distance, right? So foreground, middle ground, background. You can see here in the sketch, they used 8 different references. They have them numbered and listed here from references they found on Pixabay or Google Images, at least 1,000 pixels. And then the goal is to make them all believably seamed together. So you can't tell where one source came from and another. And we're going to control color, we're going to control lighting, we're going to control edges, and we can warp and we can place. It's easier with organic stuff than with man-made stuff, right? And so this is how we're going to start it. We're going to hit reply. You're all going to do this right now. You're going to put your name, and then you're going to put your theme so that your brain can start working on it. Mine is going to be Mount Olympus. That is my fantasy goal. Now immediately I'm going to go, and the goal is to have a sketch and some reference images for next class when you come into class on Wednesday. So this is your homework. How can I start sketching? What I want to do is go to Pixabay, just like we did for our line art in exercise 1. And I want to search Mount Olympus. Why not? Why not start there? And of course, I want to scroll past any non-royalty free images. And what's great about Pixabay is all of these are going to be very high resolution. So I open the link in a new tab. That's a really cool background mountain. And I might find hundreds of examples. I might find tens of examples. Here it only has 2 pages. There's 36 options in total. Now, of course, this isn't going to be the only thing I use, right? And I'm required to use 5, but I am probably going to download quite a few more. So when I download from Pixabay, I don't need to open the image in a new tab. I don't need to zoom in on it. I just need to download it the largest I can. And because I'm logged in, I can do it full 4,000 by 3,000 pixels. It will go into my downloads folder and just download them because they're going to inform your sketches, even though all of these are pretty similar. Now this one's kind of a nice mountaintop. It's not from Greece. It's from Burma in Myanmar. But I can see why they tagged it with Olympus, because it's a city up on a hill, right? And maybe I can make use of that. Now, because we're doing setting design and not character design, and we're going to be adding characters to them later, creature design, and then we're going to put the creatures into our landscapes, your setting should have no living things. It should have no people. It should have nothing you would expect to be moving. In fact, even waterfalls are not the best idea. Because if we animate with this as the background later, you don't want to have things that you would expect to be moving in the background, even flames, right? So think of it as a background for a stage play. So yes, clouds move very slowly, but they don't move so fast that if we see an image of it behind something that's moving, we immediately think, why aren't the clouds moving, right? But if it's water and it's a waterfall, we think, why isn't the water moving, right? Or why aren't those flames flickering? Now, that's just one search, just for the mountain. But that can get me started. So I'm going to do this digitally, and I'll do it in Photopea. But I would recommend you just do this in your sketchbook or on scratch paper. And this is my assignment 1 sketch. And the sketch is going to be the first thing you post. after you've written your theme.